Well, let's get a more in-depth view of how the market is trading today, and for comment on what's just gone down at that general meeting at Adcock Ingram. Craig Martin from sharetips.co.za is in our studio in Cape Town. Craig, I hope you heard all of that.
Yeah, I managed to hear the last part, but it's quite interesting that I think a lot of fingers have been pointed at the PIC with this particular matter, but they've indicated, well, if there's cash on the table, we're viewing this as shareholders, so a like bid for like bid, and we can make a decision. It's very difficult to see which way it will go, but certainly from Adcock's point of view, one gets the feeling that there's a will to want to work with CFR in growing into new markets going forward.
Craig, what about your thoughts on Bidvest? We just heard from Nastasia that they weren't too happy about the proceedings taking place today, and no doubt their offer is still on the table. How do you see this folding out, perhaps?
Yeah, look, I think if the indications are that Bidvest were not happy with the outcome of the postponement, then I think they'd like to start seeing this matter resolved. I don't expect that they're going to increase their offer. They've already done so, and probably let things play out. But there's certainly mixed camps in terms of which way it would go, and I think Bidvest can be very patient in this matter.
Well, it's unlikely to have much impact on the share price, but it's very sad news that Graham Mackay of SAB Miller, long-time chief executive there and chairman, has passed away this morning.
Yeah, look, he was certainly a great asset if you think of Mayor Khan, Graham Mackay. Those are the leaders that will certainly be remembered of SAB's direction. But it's very much a global player, and there's Alan Clark and others that can fill these shoes quite successfully.
Craig, we've heard a lot, particularly from Cannon Asset Management, on how the big cap stocks have had a fantastic run on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in the past year or so. Indeed, they were saying that half of the all-share index's growth was down to just 3 stocks. But you would suggest then that perhaps 2014 might belong to another sector of the market, to smaller companies. Are you looking there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's quite interesting. You've had the predominant players, as we know, and I think there's a China story behind that as well. We're talking about a slowdown in Chinese growth. I think multiples that we see 10 cent on would reflect that a correction could occur, although there's a nice growth story there. What will that do to the JSE in 2014? SA Brie has got fantastic growth out of China, so I think that's a focus area. And small players and sectors that have not done well, certainly something that to look at for 2014 on the JSE. Construction shares have had a torrid time. Some of your resource plays, I think of Exara that comes to mind, which is on really good multiples. And with the weakening rand, the improvement in exports, there's some of the sort of mid-cap companies that offer some good opportunities. I think we haven't got the buoyant small-cap market that we may have had before. And some of the small caps have started to develop into mid caps, or like your EOHs and so on. But still some opportunities around.
Craig, I had a lovely piece that I published on my site yesterday from Warren Dick, a regular contributor here on CNBC Africa. He likes Adcorp, and as you are well aware, there's been quite a lot of action in Adcorp lately. What's your view on that stock?
Yeah, it is actually. I've got a Power Portfolio newsletter that I send out, and that used to be a holding in it. It was sold recently, but we got some good growth out of it, and I do like the theme around it. Of course, the labour element has been a bit of a question mark in terms of how legislation will affect that, but I think Adcorp are doing a lot right on the educational side of things, and the growth there. So yeah, it's a nice story.
You have given us broad themes: construction, resources. What about some individual stocks that we can go and do homework on?
Right, so as I mentioned Exara in that, I like Vodacom as a dividend underpin. I know that's in the big side of things, but I think it's quite interesting with Verizon being sold out, and we've heard news now about the extra capitalization that's going to be spent. That's a nice one for the year ahead. I also think gold is one of those we didn't mention, and I like Sibanye as a gold pick, which is a smaller cap. They're doing some things right, just refinance their balance sheet. There's the acquisition of Wits Gold, and there's a good cash flow. And I think cash flow is part of the theme, because if you're going to have a soft market, you want that underpin of cash flow and cash stream, and perhaps a dividend underpin, which Sibanye offers. And some of your gold counters have been knocked 80% this year. So there's probably opportunities in that sector. Sun International, maybe not such a small player. There's certainly some growth prospects there on the international side in terms of where management are focusing. Yeah, there's a few that come to mind at the moment. Avenge in the construction sector, I think is fantastic ratings there, and now a global player, so it's not looking just at the South African market space.
Craig, are there any sectors or perhaps stocks that you are a little bit wary of?
Sectors I'm a little bit wary of. Yeah, look, I think one needs to be very careful of retail. Let's see what happens when the figures come out. Some of them are really on really high multiples, and if you look at a company like Woolworths, which has been a fantastic story for the last 3 years or so, they're now expanding their growth into expanding their food footprint, and they're going to move into markets where Truworths and Foschini were there before and benefiting from the government grants. So now Woolworths are playing almost a catch-up. A lot of their growth came from purchasing franchises, which is now all in the balance sheet. So I think some of the shares that were the darling, a lot of that growth is there, and you've got to ask, well, where they're going to get future growth from. So retail, I'm very cautious of and don't hold any at the moment.